Do you know that your ACs and refrigerators are responsible for global warming? If no, then definitely you are at the right place. Hello and welcome everyone to the Environment Primer series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pragya and today we are going to discuss a very important topic that is in news recently. The title of our today's discussion is Global Cooling Pledge at COP28. In this discussion, we'll firstly study about what are these cooling emissions and how are they causing the global warming. Then we are also going to study about some of the important refrigerants such as the HFCs and the HCFCs. Then we are also going to analyze how it is a vicious cycle. Why do we need cooling equipments and how are they causing global warming in turn? And then we are also going to see some of the solutions that can be followed to prevent this vicious cycle. And in the end, we are going to discuss a practice question for your prelims examination and a practice question for your mains examination. So if I talk about the background of our today's topic, you know that the 28th edition of the Conference of Parties is taking place in Dubai from November 28 to December 12. And many first kind of things are happening at this Conference of Parties. For example, the global stocktake. We'll discuss global stocktake in a separate video. But right now, we are focusing on this global cooling pledge. So what is this global cooling pledge? So 68 countries for the very first time, which include USA, Canada, Kenya, etc. So all of these countries have signed this global cooling pledge and it talks about cutting the cooling emissions by 68% till the year 2050. Okay, so they are trying to decrease their cooling emissions by 68% till the year 2050. Okay, so I began my discussion by asking you a question that can your ACs and refrigerators cause global warming? The answer is yes. They are responsible for these cooling emissions and these cooling emissions are 7% responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions that we are facing currently. So yes, they can cause global warming. So this brings us to the moot question of our today's discussion, that what are these cooling emissions and how are they adding up to the global warming? So these cooling emissions are essentially emissions generated from refrigerants used in appliances like ACs and refrigerators and the energy used for cooling. Let me know in the comment box below the most common refrigerant you have heard about. Okay. Refrigerants, also known as coolants, allow the refrigeration process to work due to their ability to quickly change their state. So what happens is they can quickly change their state. They can turn from solid to liquid, liquid to gas in a very short span of time. Moving forward, let us understand that as they readily absorb heat from the environment, refrigerants turn from being a cool liquid into a gas. So this is what I was explaining to you before also, that they can quickly change their state. Okay, when they release that heat into the outside, if it is a case of AC, they release it outside the building, and if it is a case of fridge, they release it outside the fridge. They transform back into liquid form and then are cycled back to start the cooling process again. So as you can figure out from whatever I have explained to you, that they do release a large amount of heat in our atmosphere and hence causing the global warming. So the most common refrigerant that was used previously were the CFCs or the chlorofluorocarbon. But what happened in 1985, a research paper was published by the scientists and they argued that these emissions of chlorofluorocarbons is damaging the ozone layer in the Antarctica to a great extent. So what happened in 1987? The Montreal Protocol was signed. Montreal Protocol was signed. Okay, and it talked about the phasing out of CFCs from the atmosphere. So these CFCs were finally replaced by two groups of chemicals named as hydrofluorocarbons or the HFCs and the hydrochlorofluorocarbons, also known as the HCFCs. But they posed a new threat to the environment. How? Let us understand. So although HFCs and HCFCs don't damage the ozone layer, They are powerful greenhouse gases. What do we mean by that they are powerful greenhouse gases? That means they can absorb the infrared rays from the environment, from the Earth's atmosphere, hence causing more warming. And that is why I'm saying that cooling emissions definitely lead to more global warming. Okay, so even in relatively small amounts, that are the HFCs, contribute significantly to a near-term warming as greenhouse gases, which are hundreds to thousands of times more potent than the carbon dioxide per unit of mass. That means they are even more dangerous than the carbon dioxide. In fact, the HFC 134A. Okay, so there is this special HFC named as 134A that is used in the domestic appliances, is 34,000 times more potent than the carbon dioxide. So just imagine the kind of greenhouse gas emissions, the kind of global warming they are causing to our climate or atmosphere. Okay, moving forward. A typical fridge can contain between 0.05 kg and 0.25 kg of refrigerant, which if it leaks into the environment, the resulting emissions would be equivalent to driving a 675 kilometer to 3427 kilometer in an average family size cars. So just imagine the greenhouse gas emissions that they are causing. So although they are not damaging the ozone layer, but yes, they are more potent than the carbon dioxide and definitely are adding to the greenhouse gas effect. Okay, now you'll ask me, ma'am, how are they leaked into our atmosphere? So the HFCs and HCFCs are released from the damaged appliances or from car air conditioning systems. 90% of the refrigerant emissions occur at the equipment's end of life and are disposed of improperly. So we are not following proper disposable mechanisms for our discarded appliances, cooling appliances, and which in turn is helping these HFCs and HCFCs leak into our environment. Okay, so there are major sources of HFCs and HCFCs. Let us discuss what are these sources. Okay, through a pictorial representation. So most of these HFCs and HCFCs are caused by stationary ACs and fridges. So the percentage is 24%. Then mobile air conditioning, 55%. Okay, then foam agents 11%, aerosols 5%, and fire extinguishers and solvent also cause 5%. So you are asking me, na, how are they leaked into the atmosphere? These are the major sources of HFCs and HCFCs, and if we do not dispose them properly, then definitely they leak a lot of amount of HFCs and HCFCs into our environment. And that is why proper solid waste management is required. Proper management of these cooling devices, proper disposing of these cooling devices is required. Moving forward, let us understand that how it is a vicious cycle. So till now we were discussing what are cooling emitters and how these cooling emitters or the refrigerants are adding up to the global warming. So what is happening? Let us understand and how it is a vicious cycle. Okay. So if we talk about currently, cooling emissions are in a huge proportion of global greenhouse gases. Currently, they are not a huge amount of forming a huge proportion of the greenhouse gases. But what is happening? Our average global temperature is rising. So the more the average global temperature, the more the demand for the cooling devices like ACs and refrigerators. The other source of cooling emissions is the electricity used to run the cooling appliances. So more the devices, more the electricity that is going to be used. And for electricity, we are hugely dependent on fossil fuels. Okay, so the developing countries are hugely dependent on the fossil fuels. Not only the developing countries, the developed countries are also dependent on them. And fossil fuels in turn leads to the global warming, the use of fossil fuels. So definitely, average global temperature is rising, global warming is increasing. Hence, the need for these more cooling devices and hence the need for more electricity, which in turn increases the global warming. Okay. So as global warming worsens, the demand for cooling will increase dramatically. which will create more warming in a destructive feedback loop. So this is what I was explaining to you before also, that yes, the more the global warming, the more the demand of cooling devices and the more they will add to the greenhouse gas effect. The greatest cooling demand will arise in Africa and Asia, where more than 1 billion people are at high risk from extreme heat due to a lack of cooling access. And if we try to provide these people the cooling access by 2050, just imagine the damage it is going to cause to our environment. Okay, so definitely we need to find solutions to these or alternatives to these cooling emissions that are increasing the global warming and to break this vicious cycle. So this brings us to another thing or another topic of discussion of our today's discussion, that what are the solutions, because we always talk about problems. Okay, so we need to follow a solution centric approach also, and COP28 is largely driven to follow a solution centric approach, because they are also talking about phasing out of fossil fuels. Okay, they are also talking about phasing down of fossil fuels. Okay, so the countries are already cognizant of the harmful impact of the HFCs. Okay, in 2016 over 150 countries signed the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, agreeing to reduce HFC consumption by 80% by 2047. So it is not so that the developed and the developing countries are not cognizant of this fact, that what are the harmful impacts of HFCs and HCFCs on our environment, and what is this vicious cycle that they need to break. And that is why for the very first time the countries have agreed and signed a global cooling pledge, that they are cutting down their cooling emissions, or trying to cut down their cooling emissions drastically, almost by 68% by 2050, because till 2050 the condition is going to be even worse. Okay, and that is why we are following a solution centric approach. So if achieved, this could avoid more than 0.4 degrees Celsius of global warming by 2100. So what are the solutions? The first solution is proper disposable mechanism of the discarded cooling devices. So as I was explaining to you before also, that yes, the improper disposing of this cooling devices releases or leaks the HFCs and the HCFCs in the environment. So we need proper disposable mechanisms. Secondly, we need more natural solutions to cooling. For example, we used to use in ancient times that we used to paint our houses with mud so as to create a natural cooling effect. We need to reduce our concrete jungles. We need to increase our forest covers, definitely. So afforestation can also be a solution. So proper disposing of these cooling devices, as well as finding natural coolants, as well as following techniques that increases the natural coolness of the environment. Plus afforestation can definitely help the countries in fighting this vicious cycle or ending this vicious cycle. With this, we come to a conclusion of our today's discussion. We have seen how are our ACs and refrigerators causing global warming. We have also seen what are cooling emissions. We have also seen that what is a vicious cycle, that the demand is definitely going to increase, and which in turn will increase the global warming. And we have also talked about the solutions the countries can follow for decreasing the greenhouse gas effect by the cooling emissions. Now let us discuss a practice question for your prelims examination. So the question is, consider the following statement. Your statement number 1 is, the global cooling pledge commits the countries to reduce their cooling emissions by at least 68% by 2050. Your statement number 2 is, cooling emissions are essentially emissions generated from refrigerants and the energy used for cooling. Which of the following statements given above is are correct? Your options are, option A is 1 only, option B is 2 only, option C is both 1 and 2, and option D is none of the above. Kindly drop your answers in the comment box below. Now let us discuss a practice question for your mains examination. So the question is, discuss the role of HCFCs and HCFCs in causing global warming. So you'll firstly explain what are cooling emissions, okay, and how they are quickly changing their state, and they are capable of quickly changing their state, and in the process a lot of heat is released into the environment. Then you are going to talk about the leakage of HFCs and HCFCs in our environment, and you will talk about how the greenhouse gas impact caused by them. And then you are going to write the solutions which I have discussed in my discussion today, and you can conclude holistically that yes, we need to find more natural cooling techniques. We need to replace these HFCs. We need to phase out these HFCs and use natural cooling techniques and use natural circumstances that can help in cooling off the environment rather than relying on these substances. Okay, so you can conclude very holistically. I hope this session was insightful for you. If you have any feedback regarding this session, kindly drop it in the comment box below. If you liked today's discussion and found it to be helpful, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel for more such updates. Thank you.